We are back on MorningLine. Final segment with Clint Kelly. We'll get to a few other calls maybe here, but what will you never tell a doctor, Clint?
Doc, just use your best judgment. I trust you.
Now, a lot of people are going to say, Clint, why? I mean, this is the doctor. I trust him. He's seen me naked. He's done tests. He's, held vials of my blood in my hand. Why not trust him?
Well, I trust him after he's had a discussion with me about the proper risks and alternatives to the procedure. What I love about the doctor-patient relationship, I like having access to the doctor to explain things to me. To me, that's part of the value of the relationship. Okay? If you just go in there and say, hey, doc, just do the best you can, go back to work, that's licensed to fail. I mean, the doctor should know, I had a conversation with this patient. You want an educated patient, don't you, Nick? Who, we go over everything. That's part of the beauty of the doctor-patient relationship, the confidentiality, the confidence in the relationship. I'll be honest, I've had clients come to me, we talked about this, who say, Clint, just settle the case, and hang up. Don't want to have any discussion about the factors involved, going back and forth. On the one hand, it makes me nervous, but on the other hand, I just do it. I'm using my judgment, but there's something being lost in the process. Right. That attorney-client relationship is also sacred. It's confidential. It's part of the confidence is having an informed client. And I just, my opinion, everybody's different, but I want to have that discussion with my doctor and make sure I understand what I'm getting myself into. So if something bad happens, hey, I knew what I was getting myself into. Right. I sure wouldn't want to be, hey, just do it, and then something bad happen and go, and you know what they do? The same guy that says, just, I'll trust you to do it, that's the guy that wants to sue. Yep.
Oh, yeah, that turns right. So you would say then, ask the questions. Some people might run into a doctor who's more hesitant to be open and such. That bedside manner the like.
The problem, like what we talked about, is the volume of the business now. The pressure on the doctors and the surgeons. They're so busy, it's just assembly line medicine. One of the bad products of assembly line medicine, they don't have enough time. I'm sure they want to. They've told me they want to. Yes. My experts have. But they don't have enough time to sit down with the patient and explain all the risks that they need to explain to have an informed patient. Even if the patient says, look, I trust you, the doctor by law is saying, look, I get that, but I need to explain these things to you so you understand. Now they're delegating that responsibility to other people, and I just think something's being lost.
Oh, no question. So just with regard to informed consent cases, okay, is it important that you can show that the patient doesn't have to ask? The doctor just automatically should say, and it has to be written down in the record, right? So that there can be proof that they did it. Because I could see, if it's not written down, the doc say, well, they misunderstood. I explained it to them. I didn't hear you say that. And then a jury's going to have to decide who to believe.
Right. The law is, well, we talk about standard of care. What do the rules applicable to that procedure require the doctor to disclose? Now, the law doesn't say it must be in writing, but other doctors, and the doctors are the ones who set the standard of care. They're the ones that declare what the rules are for their profession. Most doctors, my experts, say it should be documented because that prevents any misunderstanding, does it not?
Sure.
And that way you make sure the patient knows when they sign off to it, so that not only told about the risk, but they see it in black and white and they know what they're getting themselves into. That promotes trust in the medical system. Whereas if the doctor just doesn't say much about it or delegates to somebody else,
and the
patient's not asking, and yet a bad outcome, you're almost inviting a lawsuit in that situation, are you not? Because the patient's always going to say, I didn't know about this. Now, the doctor can't turn around and say you didn't ask.
Right. And really, the fact that you're seeing more of these types of cases is directly attached to the fact that they're so overwhelmed now. And private hospitals, for-profit, all of this, faster, more. And I think you're right. I would venture to guess the vast majority of doctors would prefer to be able to do this and have the time to spend with their patients.
We always have to remember, it's not just their job, but Nick, they're paid well.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm paid well for my profession, so I have certain duties and responsibilities because of it. Doctors and nurses, doctors more so, are paid very well to do their job. Part of being paid well is to do your job, and part of your job is to educate your patients. Just like part of my job is to educate my clients.
Yep. I would think that's part of the job, and that's just me and personal preference. As a reporter, I like to get to know isn't that part of being a good doctor and wanting to go into the business? Not just the practice of medicine and healing, but it's interacting with patients. I mean, the social aspect of it, just as you interact with your clients. That I don't know how much pleasure you get from that, to be able to get to know them and help them and watch the process. I sure would rather do that than just blindly, all right, just rule them in on an assembly line, I'll do the surgery, let's move on, you know?
I love sharing what I know, my legal knowledge with clients. I mean, knowledge is power.
Right.
Okay, there's a reason that principle's been around forever, and it's true because it's true. It's true for the doctor and it's true for the patient. Knowledge is power, and the less knowledge you have about a procedure, the more likely you are to be, for lack of a better term, embittered when you have a bad outcome.
Yeah. Listen, before we have to wrap things up, I know there's some people watching right now that have had questions. I get them, and we've talked about this before. Just if you can clarify. They want to know, is it difficult to have a case for joint replacement surgeries? You know, what they have gone wrong, hip, knee, whatever. You've told me before that they can be problematic to bring cases.
They are problematic because there are many risks associated with joint replacement, which, by the way, you tell the patient there's infection, there's bleeding, all types of things. Now, most patients have good experiences with joint replacement. I got one of my neighbors plays golf very well because of joint replacement, okay? But the cases that I get where patients have a bad outcome, generally you can have another joint replacement. It won't be as good as the first, but you can have one. And the doctors legitimately can say, look, these procedures are not always successful. As you say, there are bad outcomes where I did what I could do. And unfortunately, it just didn't work out very well. And the question then becomes, how much better would the patient be had the joint replacement gone perfectly versus where the patient is? And because that's your damages, that's your injury, and it's not easy to prove.
Yeah, because it was pretty bad beforehand.
Now you lose your leg, you have an amputation. That's an entirely different matter. Okay, that's a case I'm always interested in because you should not lose your leg from a joint replacement. I've only had one of those, but they do happen. But if it's somebody who had joint replacement surgery and then had to have the hardware taken out, new hardware put in, I don't take those cases.
One other question before we wrap things up. As you well know, as many of us do, Roe v. Wade, no longer a law in the books. We're not debating that issue this morning, but the question is, could there be malpractice cases potentially coming up if there is a situation under the law now where a doctor chooses not to perhaps go in and correct an ectopic pregnancy, or for whatever reason with the pregnancy, a woman's life is at risk, and because of the law on abortion, the doctor doesn't and the woman dies or suffers a grave illness. Do you see the possibility for litigation under that, or will doctors be protected if they have to make that call because of the Roe v. Wade decision?
Well, the laws that prohibit abortion do not provide immunity to physicians who don't provide abortions. That makes sense?
Okay.
In other words, it's not an immunity law. It's merely you cannot perform an abortion under certain circumstances. So the answer to your question is yes, I do see situations where doctors are going to be in a tough spot where they may think, I've got like a DNC within 6 weeks. And if they don't do the DNC, the concern is the patient's going to have a really bad outcome. Maybe the mother will lose the ability to have children if she doesn't have this done. What do you do if you're an OB and you talked about an ectopic pregnancy? What if there's a cyst? What if there's some other type of problem with the fallopian tubes of the cervix where the doctor says she's pregnant? I use 6 weeks. I'm just picking a number out of the air, but say it's 8 weeks. She's pregnant. If I don't do this, she's not going to be able to have children anymore. But I also have the Tennessee law that says I cannot perform an abortion.
So they're worried between being prosecuted or maybe facing a malpractice suit.
And I don't have the answer to that. Those are the types of things we're going to plow through as we move forward.
Well, and it'll be interesting to have you come on and talk about this in the months to come to see if some of these cases surface that way, one way or the other, and how it's handled in court and what will juries think.
Oh, Nick, this is going to be so messy. Really messy in terms of, because in my opinion, there's a point where the law and the medical profession meet the water's edge. In other words, I think there are places where the legislature can legislate certain things, but there are places where only doctors need to be making decisions. You can't legislate everything, and that's where this is just going to be messy.
I couldn't agree with you more. Listen, as we wrap things up, folks can call your office. We're going to have your contact information coming up now and then again at the end of the show after you leave us. But when they call, they're going to get...
They're going to get me, or they're going to get Michelle, or they're going to get Allison. Those are the people that work in my office that do medical intakes at 615-8-million. If you think you have a claim, call. The call's free. If I decide to meet with you because I think the case has merit, we can do it by Zoom. That's how I'm doing more of it now, unless we meet at the office. If I take the case and I move forward with it, you pay nothing.
And that call costs nothing. And the good thing, again, one of the reasons I think so highly of Clint is that if you don't take the case, you just won't say, can't take it, sorry, like I've heard some lawyers have done. You will explain why you can't.
I will write a letter and explain to the patient why I could not take the case if I can't take it.
Yeah.
Because the worst thing in the world is when the patient calls, I'm sorry, I won't take your case, and doesn't explain why.
There are attorneys that have done that.
You've done nothing for the patient.
And the truth is, if Clint's not going to be able to take it, it's probably a very good reason why. And it's going to be hard to find another attorney that will, because you do it usually if it's statute of limitations or there's some aspect of it that just doesn't work out. But you look at it.
I always look at them, and if I can take the case, I will. But if I can't, I will make sure the patient understands why.
A friend.
Good to see you.
Take care of yourself. We'll see you again in about a month. We'll take a break. I'll be back to wrap things up right after this.